Happy Friday, everybody. This is African Queen Mo coming to you from the beautiful city of Nairobi. I hope you're well. Thank you so much. You're joining me a little bit early today because, yes, it's Friday and I happen to have time. I also wanted to see if perhaps we'll also be able to attract a few of the Kenyans or people who are living in the 254, because usually our shows are kind of late. I wanted to experiment with this one and start it a bit early. Anyway, today the topic of the show is actually about why do people get stuck in toxic relationships? Why is it that once you realize that you are in one, that it's so difficult to leave? And I learned a new word which I'm not very familiar with. I wasn't familiar with before. I did my research, and that word is trauma bonds. Yeah, and trauma bonds are found in many different settings. It can be found in male female relationships. It can also be found in employer employee relationships, in leaders and citizens. And if you've been through trauma, you kind of tend to latch onto it and to bond to it. And it's actually exactly as the word speaks. So, for example, women become trauma bonded in marriage, for example, okay, through cycles of abuse. And those abuses could range from, on one hand, a person is flattering you and giving you lots of affection and gifts and praising you and all that, and then followed very soon by silent treatment, and after that a barrage of criticism and making you feel small, manipulation, devaluing you, making you feel like you're nothing, gaslighting you, blaming you for things that are there. And if you complain about it, then they actually talk about the fact that, they want to make it look like it's your own fault. Yeah. And so what that does is it kind of creates a cycle of dependence, because this person has been traumatized so many times that, and it's almost like they can't really escape anymore, because one minute you're being praised and the next minute, yeah, you're actually being, insulted and things like that. So anyway, today that's what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to be talking about why it is that people fear. No, nekana. Okay. Why is it that people fear? Don't worry, guys, about that person who just walked behind me, yeah? And why it is that people have low self-esteem and things like that, yeah? Sorry about that. I was almost traumatized right now by somebody walking right in. But it's okay anyway, yeah? So it's the beginning of the show. So Susan is on board. Hi, Susan. Ni sawa tu ingiza tu uko ndani, kuna shida. Hata hawakuoni. Don't worry about that, guys. There's somebody just walked in here, one of my helps. So, you guys, hi, Susan. Oh, I like your pretty shirt.
Hello, everybody.
Susan, I hope you're not traumatized by us starting early.
No, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm
Are
okay.
you
Thanks. Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Great. That's
yeah.
fabulous. Okay. So, we're talking about trauma and cycles of abuse. And I believe many of us have been through these kinds of experiences, especially when you're younger in relationships. When you're just starting off your relationship, sometimes you don't have that much experience. In fact, you have no experience with it. So if all of a sudden somebody starts showing you so much attention, bringing you flowers, giving you some surprises, and praising you on every level, and then all of a sudden they kind of sulk and they withdraw their support for you, or they kind of like go into their shell, and all of a sudden now you turn into the person who is giving them comfort, and then the next minute they're blaming you for their situation, or and telling you that perhaps it's because you're not giving them enough attention, that they don't even like the relationships that you have with your family, and maybe these people are influencing you against them. People use so much manipulation, psychological manipulation, and a lot of that is learned when we are growing up as children. It sometimes happens that in families, you have a parent or both parents, if you're not lucky, or grandparents, or the like, whose parenting style is about, manipulating you. So they will love bomb you and then at the same time criticize you. Like for example, they will criticize you if you do if you make one single tiny mistake, if you don't live up to their expectations, either with your grades or if you don't look a certain way like they expected you to turn out, or they'll compare you to your siblings. I mean, we go through a lot of trauma. Most of us have these trauma bonds, and it's almost impossible to escape those kinds of trauma bonds, especially like in families. On the other hand, we also have trauma bonding in the area of, for example, in the big R. Racism, for example, is a sort of trauma bond. Where you start trying to make yourself liked. Try to, first of all, they'll tell you something like, I remember going through this kind of trauma bond. Let me give you an example. When I was in the United States, the first few years of my education, we were African students, and many of us were being trauma bonded by our professors. And I used to hear the professors say things like, "Oh, you guys are so intelligent. African students are so intelligent." And it's as if they're trying to say something about the fact that the Black students in America were not quite like us. And then at the same time, they would also criticize us, because they would say, "Oh, they maybe they'll criticize us, but not directly, but they'll be criticizing our continent, our countries, our relationships, polygamy, all that kind of thing." So, it's a love-hate kind of situation that you develop with some of these professors who, especially, people who are not your same skin tone color. And unfortunately, we went through that, and many people did not understand what was happening. And you'd find that some African students would want to always try to get very close to their professors to try to please them. And then this is the same thing that you also see here. You see white tourists coming to our countries, and because we are trauma bonded to them, not us, not myself, but many people in the country are trauma bonded to them. You go into a restaurant and you find a waiter rushing to serve the tourist who is from Europe and leave you who came earlier from the country there. Or even if there's like a white tourist and a Black tourist, they may decide to choose. And these are some sort of trauma. This is actually comes from historical trauma. The history of colonialism is a sort of trauma bond. The same thing with the history of enslavement is a trauma bond. And the same thing of devaluing anything that devalues you as a human being. Yeah. That starts with initial, appreciation, and at the same time criticism. Like, for example, they'll say something like, "Oh, my workers are so hardworking. And, but, they don't really know much. They're not highly educated." So that's a sort of devaluation of the person. Isolation. The workplace can also decide to isolate you by giving you just a few days of leave a year. That's a sort of trauma bond. So now they want you to be working for them 24/7 and give you so little time to go spend with your family. So that's some sort of, and then at the same time, they'll give you praises about how hardworking you are and how dedicated and committed you are to your job. So basically, trauma bonds are on all levels. But today I was watching a video of a Kenyan lady who experienced trauma in her relationship. And I think I'm going to play you just a little bit of that. I'm going to share the screen with you and you can watch it, at least
Can I say
partially.
something? Can I say something? I just want to
Just a
add.
minute, Susan. Let me just
Oh,
share first. Yeah, just a minute, please. Yeah, because I want to just keep my. Sorry, I'm just gonna cut Susan off a bit, and then she can respond. Okay. That I was watching, I'll just show just a few minutes, and Susan can respond.
And in this life, I have come to learn a lesson about self-worth. I'm a mother of 2 children, and sometimes I wonder how much of self-worth I'm teaching them, or even to myself. How much do I value myself? I have been married for 17 years, and this person that you're supposedly supposed to be in love with, is the same person that reminds you constantly how not worthy you are. When I met him, I was studying abroad, okay? We were both students. So he's the only family I had. Of course, a boy meets a girl, you're in love. It was all honeymoon in the beginning. And we're long distance. We're not staying in the same city. So after 1 year of dating long distance, I moved in with him, all right? There was constant communication. You know, when you're dating, you're always talking all the time. You want to know where someone is, what you've eaten. So it was like that. And at some point, even because we're both students, he asked me for my school timetable. So he would know what lesson I'm having at what time, when I went for lunch, what I ate for lunch, which is okay. I mean, you're in love, aren't you? Moving in with him, it was not easy. You know, you're two different people from two different worlds. So you're staying with this human. You have to learn each other afresh. Remember, we're not staying in the same city. Now you're staying in the same apartment. So you're learning each other all over again. Your habits, everything. In the beginning, it was okay. But as it went on, I realized this person is kind of short-tempered. Yeah? And he would get so mad. And then 5 minutes later, it's over. It's like he's not the same person you were talking to. It's gone. I was like, oh, but that's okay. It's not so bad. He gets mad and then quickly he gets over it. Or sometimes he would just go silent and you don't know why. And then gets over it. Then he starts talking to you again. So when he gets to those silent moods, I would ask, is something wrong, or did I do something wrong? Is there something bothering you? Sometimes he would say he just wants space. He just wants something from work or something. Or sometimes he'd tell me I'm crowding him or something.
Okay, so just showing you 5 minutes of that particular video that was really, really shocking. You really need to watch that video. It's a very interesting story of a lady. Her life with her, it talks about my life with a narcissist husband, Eunice Muturi's story. Guys, go and watch that story. It's part 1 and part 2. We're not going to play the whole thing here, but we're going to learn a few things from that story. Susan, yeah, please take over now, Susan. Sorry.
I wanted to talk about, the different, you talked about how a trauma bond develops earlier on, and the other aspects, including developing sympathy and affection for the abuser. The third, because you talked about the first one, was when you over time go through cycles of abuse and affection. So the person is blowing hot and cold. So they are love bombing you sometimes and then treating you really badly. Then they love bomb you. Then, so the third one is you struggle. The victim struggles to differentiate between abuse and affection. So they're not able to distinguish the two because of the mental whirlwind they're in. And then fourthly, the victim may be conditioned to expect positive reinforcement from the abuser. So they seek like positive reinforcement from time to time. So this is a cycle of behavior, and it's extremely traumatic. One of the examples, again, of trauma bond is the Stockholm syndrome. We've heard about it, where people fall in love with their captives. Recently, I saw a video where one of the Israeli hostages was being released, and he kissed the forehead of one of his captives. And so that's like the Stockholm syndrome, where you know, you feel it's like you have a change of mindset. You feel that affection. You develop some affection for your abuser, and you can't differentiate now between abuse and affection. So I just wanted to talk about that. Yeah, this is a tragic story. Of And one thing I like about it is she comes out the winner in the end. So despite the struggles that she goes through, and as Queen Mo said, it's so important that you watch it so that you can see how the trauma bond was formed and how she got out of it. You can see the type of abuse and also pick up the red flags, which I know many of us watching may be able to pick up on our own from relationships we've witnessed or even our own relationship. So the first thing I noticed about it is that their relationship was 1 year, and they lived in different parts, and they were met in school. And the person that she knew in this 1 year seemed to be a very different, likable, lovable person. So 1 year relationship before you move in is actually quite a short time. You start living with somebody, that's actually a short time. So straight away, this tells you this is a red flag. When you move from very quickly into a relationship to now a point of commitment where you're moving and living in with somebody. One of the things that she said,
I think also that she said that they were in a different, they were abroad. She was overseas. So they were in a different country. I think that's also important to mention there. So that was her only family. She talked about that.
yeah, that notwithstanding, she chose to move in with him. She could have chosen to live somewhere else in her own house, but she chose to move in with him. The other thing that struck me was the thing he said. He wanted her timetable when she was in school. That quickly tells me that this is somebody who needs to know where she is all the time. And that is a control mechanism. And one thing that, like the trauma bond, we talked about not being able to differentiate abuse from affection. So that wanting to know where she is all the time is not necessarily a good thing. It's something that we need to watch in our relationships. When you have a relationship with somebody and they want to know where you are all the time, they're calling you all the time, they put a tracker on your phone, or something like that, so they can know where you are. They check the mileage when you've driven the car to find out, in some cases they even know the distance between your home to the office and back. So and then they check the mileage, and then they'll say, where did you go? You've driven 5 extra kilometers. That's a control mechanism, and that to me was a red flag right there. And this is when they were still at the dating phase before she moved in. Um, then they started moving in. She observed, okay, it's different. They're two adults living and sharing a space. They used to living on their own, and now they have to share this space. Now they've chosen to share this space. The moving in is not a red flag. The red flag is that
All right. It looks like we've lost Susan, and I believe that she will be back soon. But basically, I can also let me allow her to try and come back on. Looking forward to seeing you, Susan. Okay, so basically, what happened is that these, like what Susan was explaining, because we both watched the same video, very interesting video. She moved from one city. She moved from the city where she was at, and she joined her boyfriend. And then after that, I believe Susan is back. She moved from where she was, and then she joined her boyfriend in a different city, and therefore she left the people that were close to her. She didn't have any friends where she was going to go, where she was now staying with her boyfriend. So go on, Susan. Anyway, yeah, welcome back, Susan.
yeah, sorry. There was
Karibu.
interference there. Yeah, so I was saying she moved in with him, and like Queen Mo has said, she was her family were not there. His family were around, apparently. I think he had friends, and she moved into his space, and so she was isolated. She was isolated. So she was very, very dependent on him. So she created some sort of codependency on him. She had no time to form a network or a support system. And so what she observed is that he somehow got his behavior changed. So the mask, once, the difference is when he was dating, the mask was on. But now they're now in a like committed relationship, he doesn't need to wear the mask anyway. And she's now within his control. She's living in his space, a space that he's controlling. So the mask fell, and she experienced this mercurial um, temper, mercurial behavior, emotional abuse, sort of smacking of what she was describing. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but it sounded like some sort of bipolar behavior, because she was going from one extreme to the other, which, that's very, very difficult to deal with. There was gaslighting too, the silence, and then, not talking, and then the sudden change of mood and stuff like that, um, in that sort of experience. And she said that the mood became more frequent. The rages that he was having were more frequent. That means he's not able to control himself, but he was creating some fear. He was trying to control her using fear, and she was in this isolated situation. She had no friends around her and no family. And then when she asked questions, he was victim blaming. So he would turn it over on her. And this is something that's typical of narcissists. They never apologize. They will never accept blame for the behavior, but they'll turn it over and say, it is your fault that I am behaving this way. It is your fault. So you can see how that would affect her self-confidence. She'll start questioning herself and stuff like that. In her opening remarks, she talked about self-worth. She talked about valuing self, and she learned. This was a journey where she got to that point where she learned more about herself and understood how important it is to have that self-worth. Um, and she was always apologizing. She was all apologizing. He was never wrong. Narcissists are never wrong. They know everything. You know, they overvalue themselves and devalue other people. They're never wrong. It's very difficult for them to apologize for anything. And even if you try to get them, they might say, like, but I did. But you didn't hear the apology, but they'll claim they apologize. The other thing about narcissists is the dishonesty. So this guy was going out for 3 days. He'd leave the house for 3 days and go and do whatever he's doing and then come back. And when she asked him where he was, he'll become very irritated. That is a red flag. He's in a committed relationship. He has a woman in his house, and yet he's going out and he doesn't feel he's accountable to her in any way to answer, to say anything. If it was the other way around, and we saw later on in the story that she came home late, and then he accused her of having a sexual relationship with men, and not to her face. Actually, he told her children that she was having relationship with other men, and she was late coming back from work. So when the coin when things turned around, he accused her. So that means that he was inherently quite a dishonest person. There are integrity issues there. He was not honest about his relationship. And one of the things is that inability also with narcissists is that they play the field even when they are married or in committed relationship. They're not dependable when it comes to that. The other thing she pointed to was that she became so desensitized because she was in this cycle of trauma bond where he would maybe treat her well and then do something abusive, then treat her well again. And so she, the constant apologizing for mistakes. And even in her mind, she was thinking, I'm not really the one who's at wrong, but maybe let me just apologize so that there's peace in the house, and it will make him feel better. And so she ended up being very self-effacing, And obviously must have been enjoying that control he was having over her. And if any of us find ourselves in a situation where you're supposed to be in a relationship with somebody, even a friendship, where you're always apologizing, even when you know that it's not you at fault. Um, I remember yeah, I had a friend, and this friend had a mercurial temper. She was very difficult to get along with, but for some reason I was able to get along with her. Maybe I'm mild mannered most of the time, so she could lose her temper left, right, and center, and just do weird things, and then accuse you of doing something. So one time she accused me of saying something to somebody else about something. And I told her, no, I didn't actually do that. It is you who did it. Because actually I was present when she told that person. So I knew she's the one who gave that person that information. But she accused me of having told that person that information. And she went into a sulk. So I just apologized. I said, okay, it's fine. I apologize. But I knew I had not done it. That, you see, in the back of my mind, that was the type of like trauma bond, because I was being accused of things I didn't do. And I knew very clearly I did not do them. And I was present when she said it to somebody else. And, just to satisfy her, to calm her down, I had to apologize, that sort of thing. So that type of relationship is abusive. That is abusive. You need to get as far away from that individual as possible. You'll be emotionally exhausted. I can just imagine how tired emotionally Eunice was when being treated through this whirlwind. And don't forget, she's just finished her degree and she's transitioning into a new life. So there's so many things she's thinking about, getting a job, that sort of thing. And here is this, she's dealing with this emotional whirlwind right there. So those are red flags. The other thing is that they came back to Kenya. So there was a change of, after they finished, eventually they came back to Kenya and they had a child. So his behavior, like I said, he would go when they're in Kenya. That's when he started disappearing from the matrimonial home, and when she asked, it would be threats of violence. Of course, that was to a control mechanism to stop her from asking him any questions. So she stopped asking any question. That's another control mechanism. That's another control mechanism. And some of the insults he used to hurl her way, just to make sure that she doesn't look beyond him, or look outside of him. And a way of controlling her and keeping her not feeling good about herself was to body shame her. Tell her she's ugly, and he would attack her confidence that way, saying that nobody else could have anything to do with somebody like her except him. Straight away, that's a control mechanism, and that is, an abusive, an emotionally abusive situation. And you can imagine the damage by telling somebody, you don't look good, you're ugly. That is, some people have been traumatized by being told they're ugly when they were children, and they've never outgrown it as adults. And it has really affected their relationships. They get even surprised when other people tell them that actually you're pretty, you're not ugly, because of what somebody said earlier on in their life. And this is an adult, a man who's supposed to be the love of your life, who's calling you ugly. And she's not the first person in my field of work that I've come across where men have actually body shamed. Somebody I know, the spouse used to lift her, literally. The scruff of the neck lifting. When you say scruff of the neck, being lifted literally like that, lifted in front of the mirror and asked her to look in the mirror and say whether she has ever seen anything so ugly in her life.
Jeez.
Yeah.
No,
So
Susan, this
what
can't
what should
happen.
yeah
Guy, what are
what
you women going through in the name of a ring? What are you going through, ladies? Ladies, what is this? Oh, when I hear such kind of stories, I know because listening to her story, this gentleman, this husband of hers, first of all, body shamed her for having a child. Who can love somebody who has given birth? That is supposed to be your husband. Women, what are you going through and you're not saying anything? You're just taking it. Susan, continue. That your story is too scary.
Yeah,
But
that
at
is
some
what.
point, you'll give me some time to show the reel a little bit so that people get to be familiar with the story.
Actually, let me just finish what I'm saying, then you can share some more. Yeah, so not only, just to add on to what Queen Moa said, not only she is the love of your life, somebody you're supposed to love, she's the mother of your child. She's the mother of your child. Who, when we speak in our mother's tongue, we say mother of so and so. That's an address of respect. That is how a woman who's had, that's how it's a sign of respect. And this man was completely unable even to appreciate that this was the mother of his child. Carry on.
Yeah, and guys, it's not just women who suffer under the hands of men with this kind of trauma bonds. Men too, they suffer under the hands of women. There are some wives who do not apologize when they do wrong to their husbands. They cannot bring themselves to say, I am sorry. Yeah? So you'll hear the husband always apologizing. You'll hear it a lot. And other things, you'll also hear women shaming and body shaming their husbands, telling them they have a big stomach, that they have a bald head, that they're not even good looking. If it wasn't for the fact that you had money, or if just because you took advantage of me when I was young, I would never have married a man like you. You know, a man like you who doesn't have a good job. Look at your peers. Look at your mates. Look at your mates. Look at the money they're making. Eh? Women also shame men. It's a terrible thing. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I have seen when men are bowing down, bending down backwards, bending over backwards to try to make their wives happy. And the women are never happy, ever, not a single day in their lives. I've seen it with my own eyes, guys. I've seen it. And I feel for those men. And usually it's the very nice, quiet guys, who get these nasty women. Nasty. I'm a woman too. And it hurts me when I see my fellow sister mistreating her husband. It's disgusting, actually, quite disgusting. The question I always ask myself is, so what are you doing with him? So you just leave. She won't leave. She just uses the guy as a punching bag, mistreats him, and actually kills his self esteem and kills his ego. There's nothing worse. There's a friend of mine who told me, and she was married to a pastor in the U.S., and she told me that that in Kikuyu, in the Kikuyu language, her husband told her that a man without his ego is like a lion, a male lion without his mane. You know the mane, yeah? That mane is the one that makes the lion beautiful and strong and tough and all that and confident. A man without his ego, once you shave off his ego, you got nothing. You don't have a man left. And that's the reason we're seeing so many men who are so depressed on bottles. They go to the bar, they drink, they stay away from the house, they sleep on the couch, they sleep in their cars. I mean, we have to talk about that, ladies, because we know that we push our husbands away sometimes. Yeah. So it's not just a matter of bashing. We're not bashing men here. We're talking about the situation on both sides. Yeah. And in this particular case, it's only that we happen to find a very interesting story about a very sad and interesting story about this lady who literally met up with a bipolar narcissist. He's everything combined. But anyway, let me show you a little bit more of that video. I hope the creator will appreciate the fact that I'm showing his video here. And not blast me. But anyway, let me move on a bit more.
You are doing this constantly. But I didn't give in at that time. I stayed for so long. I think 2 years later, we moved now from Nairobi. We went to Kajiado. And my children called their dads like, you said you lived around here, now we are here. So there's no point of you being where you are, because we are here, you should come. I was not aware of that conversation. So he called, he said, the kids tell me you're living around here. When did you move? I didn't know what to say because me, I'm living my life.
Okay. This is the second part of that particular episode called My Life with a Narcissistic Husband, Eunice Muturi's Story Part 2. Okay. This is after she had already left. The first part I showed you was part 1. I didn't even show you much of it, but I might have to go back. But this is when she finally decided to move after a long time of abuse, you know, and then she happened to finally get her act together and actually ended up buying a car. And then she saw her husband in the traffic while she was in a car, and she waved at him. You know, talk about trauma bonding. Yeah, he's driving his car, she's driving her car, and she waves. Me, I wouldn't even, I'll try to make sure he doesn't see me. But she waves at him. And from then on, he started calling and calling and calling her. Yeah, he wouldn't stop calling her. And eventually, she kind of like broke down under the weight of guilt. And then her children, I think it was, contacted him, or they started talking. And then somehow he moved back into the house anyway. Susan can tell you the rest.
Yeah, about 22 months later, because she left him 3 times. No, she went back 3 times. She went back 3 times. And that's part of the trauma bond story, her inability to disconnect herself from him. And she actually went back to him 3 times. Yeah, so after the first time, she saw him. She saw him. This is during the second time when she had returned. She was actually beaten up quite badly the second time she returned, because she asked him, she needed the car. And so he had gone with the car. So she went to look for him. She knew there's the bars he frequents. And she found him, but she found him in the company of another lady. He drove off. She went home. When she got home, he took her into the room and he locked the door and beat her so thoroughly. And the children were crying outside because they could hear there was some trouble inside the house, inside. So she left, you know, she left, and she was away from him for about 22 months. But during this time when she was struggling, this second phase, when she went back, she was so traumatized by him. He had beaten her so badly. After beating her, they actually went out together. So she had to sort of like pretend all is okay, but she has just received a thorough beating from this man. And then, she said during that period she suffered suicidal ideation. She said she had several thoughts of unaliving herself. And it's only the thought of her children that kept her going. But she was in that very, very, very depressed state. So finally, she escaped from there. She took off with the children, and he had some intermittent visits with the children. So this is what I want to point out. She has left him, but he's still maintaining some control over her. Perhaps not directly, and also through the children, because the children want to see their dad. And these type of characters are often very different toward their children than they are to their spouse. So they can batter their wives, but they won't batter their children. In fact, they don't like their children to see them being cruel or mistreating their mother. So they hide it. That's why he locked them in the bedroom, so he could beat her in case the children came in and started defending. So the children don't know what was happening on the other side of the door. And that's a very serious sign. When you notice that your spouse, or because we're talking, it could be the male spouse or the female spouse who's the abuser, whichever, has a tendency to be very different in front of the children. The children never see the cruelty, never see the beating. They see the black eye, but they don't know how you got it. Maybe they heard you crying in the room, but they don't know how. And many women pretend. They will say, oh no, there's nothing wrong, there's this, there's that, the other, and the other, and they pretend there's nothing wrong. And so they keep silent about it. But the children are not foolish. They eventually will cotton on that this is not normal behavior. So for sure, after 2 years, she moved back to 2 years after. So about 2 years after, she moved to Kajiado, and the children knew their dad lived in Kajiado. So when their dad lived in Kajiado, the children wanted the parents to get back together, and she said, they really pushed for the parents to live together. Uh, Here, definitely children are, the children themselves were emotionally affected by the breakup of the marriage, by the way which the lady said she was being accused of by her husband. He was blaming her for leaving, and so I'm sure the children were getting that story that they left because of the mother. Whenever they were with the father, he would blame her, and so when they moved to the same area where he was living, she didn't even know he lived there. That when she moved to Kajiado, the children sort of pushed it so that they could live together. But one thing I want to talk about here is that you need to be very careful the type of narcissist you're dealing with. There's some who are extremely dangerous. And for instance, somebody who's shown a tendency to be violent. The children have pushed them sort of into a situation where they restored their living arrangement again. So this is the third return now. So she left, came back, and then this is the third. She left. Okay, she moved in, left. Moved in the second time, left. Now this is the third time she's going back to him because of the pressure of the children. We need to watch out because our children don't always understand what is happening because parents tend to hide the truth from the children. So you could be walking into a danger place for the sake of your children, but you need to weigh the issues very, very carefully
Yeah,
because
true.
you know that you have the facts. Are you going to walk into a situation where the trauma that will occur at the end of the day will be worse? In other words, what I'm saying, are you going to end up never leaving that place alive because your children have
Hmm.
insisted you should go back together? Because
Hmm.
you've been able to hide the type of violence that you're experiencing or the threats. Because
Yeah.
when she talked about the violence, when she found him with the car and he was with another lady and he locked them in the room, she talks about him choking her, which is a very bad sign. If
Pinning
somebody
her to the
chokes you,
ground.
yes, and boxing, hitting her head, yeah, and then banging her head and choking.
Hmm.
Choking, even the what you call it, the forensic psychologists and those people, they say that choking is a very dangerous sign that somebody can eventually just press too hard and that's the end of you. So whenever is a situation, don't ever take it lightly, ladies and gentlemen. If somebody is holding you, has a tendency to hold your neck and squeeze, that is a
Hmm.
bad sign. One day they will actually squeeze it and not stop. So that is a dangerous relationship. So the fact that he was choking her, to me, as somebody who's worked in this area, that's a danger sign. That's a red flag straight away. This is a dangerous man. You know, um, apart from the fact that he was banging her head, but the choking is a really, really telling sign. So that
Hmm.
business of the children putting pressure on you to go back into a space that you know because you have all the facts is dangerous. Let's guard against that. You need to find a way to actually, at that point, make a proper decision, a safe decision for your family and for your children, because you don't want to be in a situation where your one parent has unalived the other. What type of
Yeah.
legacy are you leaving your children? It's
Yeah.
better to get out before you get to that space. So I
Okay,
was a bit
Susan,
worried.
let me read Louis' response here. Thank you, Louis. Hi, Louis. Welcome to the show, and Fia as well. Let we prioritize responses of our participants because we know that you probably have limited time. So Fia says yeah, she's greeting everybody. Hi, Fia. And Louis says, when I was living with a single mom of two, she said to me, "You are the most stupidest person I've met." But she said it in a nasty face and a nasty way. How yeah, how is that supposed to enrich my life with that kind of commentary at home? Yeah. And I said to him, good, you're no longer with her. And Louis said, I'm bringing this up because of what was mentioned earlier of a man without an ego is like a lion without a mane. Terrible behavior. And then you see, Fia said terrible behavior. Absolutely. How did it make you feel? Because you see, Louis is a male. I'm so glad. I'm so happy that, Louis, you have shared that as a man, because it's true that you can allow yourself to be subjected to abuse by a woman, a man, and many men are subjected to abuse by women, and they take it. They're told to take it like a man. You're a man. No, 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 no. That is completely wrong. You do not take it like a man, because we've heard of women also who kill you. They can kill you physically, but they can also kill you emotionally, psychologically. They can make it so that you cannot even work. Yeah. And you know, for a man, what work means. Work is everything to a man. I've seen men whose self esteem has been so depleted and diminished by the woman that they're with that they second guess themselves and are unable to make decisions and be the head of the household. You should take it like a life or death situation. And I would say for the many men, there are, as much as there are women who stay for their children, there are also many, many men out there who are staying for their kids. They are, because they're afraid of leaving their children in the hands of such a woman. They think that they can deal with that woman better than their children can. So it's kind of like maybe these men who really feel very paternalistic and they have very strong fatherly instincts, and they feel that they have to protect their children. So what they do is that they actually hide everything that's going on at home. But the sad thing is that, as much as Susan says, some children are not aware really, a lot of children are also aware. They know what's going on, and they know from when they're very little, but they may not be able to articulate it. What they can see is that mommy is being unfair to daddy. Yeah. And they can tell the mom, you must apologize. Say sorry to dad. You know, that's a sign. If your child is telling your wife, say sorry to your dad, it means, children are egalitarian. Children know justice. They're born with it. They know it. That's why they cry when there's injustice, when they don't get their food. So they're a very good indicator of what is toxic in the family or who is toxic in the family. So all I can tell is men who are living with bipolar women, schizophrenic, narcissistic, and they're not on medication and they don't accept it and they don't apologize and they don't want to change. No, out. In Kikuyu, we say out nature. Out is outside. Get out the door. Leave her. It's okay. Leave. The same thing we would tell women. If your man is abusing you, making you feel depleted, who are you? A lot of women, I've seen videos where, for example, right now, I know I watched a video, another one. This is going on a lot, of this young woman whose boyfriend, I think he's a husband now, asked her to stop going to the clubs. And she said, no, I'm not going to stop going to the clubs. No, I'm going to lose myself. I don't want to lose myself by being a staying at home wife. And the man says, don't worry, I'm going to pay you for it. And she says, no, I'm going to. So she's actually divorcing the guy. And they have a child only because he asked her to stop going to the clubs all the time. And she said, I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to be that woman who has lost herself in a marriage. And you see that people are going through a lot, guys. People are going through a lot. That's a different video now. But in this particular case, this man, like Susan said, pinned her to the ground, choked her, and still she was going nowhere. It was only when the time that she finally left, I'll let Susan talk about it, but the time that she finally left, her child had something to do with it. Her child. Remember, Susan? Her child is the one who finally, when the light went off in her head, it's when she noticed the impact on her children. Her child said, Mom, we need to talk. We need to talk. Okay. When the father, went out there, he says, Mom, we need to talk. And she asked the mom said, okay, no problem. Let me just tell it since I started. And she said, what do you want to talk about? She asked the mom, So why is it that our dad behaves like some of those crazy people outside there? And she was like, what? What I've been trying to hide away from my children, you mean they're seeing it clear as day? Can you imagine the embarrassment? Yeah? The embarrassment as a father or a mother being told about your spouse. Your child is telling you that your spouse is crazy, you know? A lot of children actually have saved their mothers and fathers. They have. But sometimes people don't listen to their kids. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah. She
Terrible
asked.
behavior, as Fia says. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, she asked several questions. She said, "Why does he behave like somebody who's not mentally okay?" And she said, "I've noticed that whenever he's around, you're sad, and that he doesn't work. He needs to leave." And she was 12 years old, and she said he needs to leave. She actually, what she observed was that he's toxic. He's toxic for the
Yeah.
home, that she's not
He-
never,
he-
the mother never happy when he's around, and that his behavior, his mental behavior, he's too erratic. And so it
yeah.
means that she was also being trauma bonded, but maybe she
Yes.
was
And
a step away, so she was
mhm.
able to respond to it in a different way.
Yeah. And she was also saying that it's okay, mom. He can come and visit us. No, we can go and visit him. He doesn't have to come and visit us. He can go stay out there and we can go visit him. Imagine your children are the ones who are giving you solutions for how to handle your relationship. Before you get to that point, ladies and gentlemen, please handle the situation at home. Please. Yeah? Marriage is not life or death. Really, it's not. You can be married to the wrong person. People are good at camouflaging who they are. They're at their very best behavior. Like Susan was talking about the first year of a relationship. If people are not being genuinely, being genuine in the first year, it's very difficult to tell. We hear stories of people who met today, married tomorrow, were together for 60 years of their marriage. We hear that. Yes, it's not there's no actual formula, really. What's important is that each person is being genuinely who they are. And most of the times they're not. Many people hide a lot of their character flaws, especially when they're
Yeah,
long distance. Like one person is in one city, the other one is another or country. It's a luck thing here about whether people will really be genuine and be who they are.
yeah,
Okay,
and
thank
they're
you so
real.
much, guys, for watching. We see you there. We see the eyes. See many people are watching us, and we also invite you to come into the comments. We do have a link in the StreamYard, and yeah. So let's continue, Susan.
Yeah, in fact, one thing is that usually in the initial part, when people first meet and then before they commit to dating and stuff like that, that is actually a very tender area, tender period. People pretend more. They're in this what they call the honeymoon stage and stuff like that. But if you're able to pick up clues, you know that would really really help you to identify early enough before you really get committed to this person, that this person may not be the safest person. You may like them, but they may not be safe because you've not really seen the manifestation of what is dangerous about them. And it's those little things, like I said, he wanted to know her school timetable. She mistook it for love, but it's actually control. Why do you need to know my timetable? That sort of thing. He's trying to control. He wanted to know where she was all the time, literally. Little things like that. The other thing that listening to stories about and documentaries about domestic violence, um, and how people got into these relationships with these narcissistic characters, they say that the person mimics what you like. So when you're forming a relationship and you start to tell the other person so much about what you like and what you don't like, the people who are narcissistic, or the people who have psychopathic tendencies, will, because they want to reel you into a relationship and get that commitment from you, they will do exactly what you like them to do. If you like red roses, they'll buy you red roses. If you like Hershey's Kisses, the chocolate, they'll buy you that. If you like fruit cake, they'll buy you that. If you like going to the national park, if you like, they'll make sure they meet those requirements until they've got you. Once they've got you, once you've got that commitment from you and you're under their control, everything changes after that. So, it's how do we know? How can we tell? A lot of it is also is about the people around that person. The people around that person will be able to help you know that this could be something you need to watch out for in that person. The even the by the way, even the stories they might tell you about their exes, that would also tell you something if you listen critically to what they're saying and really ask the question. Because let me tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, you're no different. Don't think that you're going to get special treatment. If the guy, if the person is not treated a former girlfriend well, you're likely to be treated the same way. You're likely to be treated the same way. Even former wives, second wives, third wives, when they're the same harassment the first wife got, the second wife is going to get, the fourth wife is going to get it, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So these are tales. These are tales. Maybe you have even maybe you have maybe something you've observed when he's with the family. His tendency to bully his siblings, or her tendency to bully her siblings, the way she speaks
Yeah,
to her
that's true.
parents, or something like that. The entitlement and stuff like that. The things that you need to. The other tell is how they treat people they think are below them. Remember, the narcissist overvalues themselves and devalues others. So the waiter, the worker in the house, that sort of thing. You go out for a drink, you go out for dinner, the waiter is sent back 5 times because the food is not yellow enough, goes back. It doesn't have salt, it's not back. Can I see the manager? That sort of person harassing the waiters. I think you know what I'm talking about. That type of tantrums. Watch out for those type of clues at the earlier stages, and so that you don't get very deeply involved, and that trauma bond is not formed. Because it can be really bad. So this, like Queen Mo said, it is actually the daughter who pushed the point, but the mother was already thinking about that, because he was not just manipulating her, he started to manipulate the children further by telling them, your mother didn't come early because she was out with men. And the children told their mother the following day,
Yeah,
do you know
how
what
do
dad
men,
said?
first of all, when men start talking to, or even women start talking to their children, they're weaponizing the kids, you know? But can I show something as soon as I can? I want to show just a portion here, just to
Yeah,
keep you
sure.
guys in the loop, because I know some of you didn't watch or you may not even watch. But I actually jumped a little bit to part two, but I didn't show you the very first part of part two. Let me show it to you. I think I did. I
When I
don't
came
know.
back home, I was beaten. He threw me to the bedroom, pushed me to the bedroom, locked the door. I was beaten and told me, I told you, you're not worth anything.
Okay, so let me move it a bit forward.
You know, it was like, oh, don't worry, you need counseling, you need all that. So during that time, we bonded over that. Trauma bonding. So he captured me with that. So during
Oh,
that
sorry,
time, I
this is
kept
important.
insisting.
Hold on. Okay, let me let
Came
you
about, I
listen.
asked him, do you know there's this thing? And do you know you have those traits? It's like, yeah,
She accused him of being a
even me, I
narcissist.
think I've not been okay. I've not been okay. I've been wondering what's happening to me. I've been wondering how come I'm not okay. But as a child, I suffered this kind of trauma, a lot of sob stories. And being an empath, see, I sympathized, It was like, oh, don't worry, you need counseling, you need all that. So during that time, we bonded over that. Trauma bonding. So he captured me with that. So During that time, I kept insisting, you need to go for counseling, you need to go for counseling. But you know, these people do not go for counseling. Someone who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, they outsmart a therapist. They know how to play with your mind, they know how to play with your emotions. Because they are master manipulators, they already know, they've read you, and they've known how to manipulate you as a therapist. So imagine just a normal person like me, right? So they never go for therapy because it won't work. You know, they've already put up a false core, a false image away from their true. These are people who've suffered probably trauma when they were young. So that has been their defense mechanism, and that became their reality. They lack empathy. They're ice cold. They have no feeling. They're very entitled. They are superficial. They like grandiosity. They create this big image of themselves because inside there's nothing. And they're jealous. They're envious. And so the more you succeed, the more they're hurt and the more they'll come back at you. Right? They have to put you down. They have to devalue you. And when they're done, they discard you and they're on to the next victim. They're such predators. They go for people who have empathy or highly sensitive people and who have codependency issues. Like you see, now we met abroad. I have no one. So I'm a perfect victim for them. I was perfect. I suit that position so well. And that's how he was able to manipulate me psychologically. I was doing a play with heartstrings. And
Okay. I give it to Eunice because she really understands her situation. She understands. She understands not, she has actually studied it. She studied it. I think she should go into therapy and become a therapist herself, because she understands the narcissist, because she's lived it. She talked about the person being jealous, envious, master manipulator, presenting a different self from who they really are in public, refusing counseling, refusing to apologize, always, looking for people who are vulnerable, who they can, mold into what they want. Actually, these have to be evil people. These are evil. And, there's evil people walking amongst us. They're here and they're so selfish. One of the best ways to know, to me, a narcissist is somebody who's selfish, because that's actually the basis. Self-centered, only think about themselves. It's really hard. And if you happen to be married to such a person or dating such a person who always puts themselves first, always wants to make themselves look like they are so important. Women use many different types of things to make themselves look important. Okay? Um, in our current environment, many women overdo makeup. A woman who overdoes makeup is a red flag, guys. If you overdo it, it means that you're trying to look for this grandiosity. Yeah. Unless you're an artist, unless you're artistic, there's artsy people. But then there's some people who want to like overdo who they really are, presenting a different image of who they really are. I know of a specific lady who I worked with once. I won't mention her name or the organization, but I remember her complaining that they never have visitors. Why? Because her husband is not comfortable with visitors. He's a hermit. He's always home and he doesn't like anybody coming to visit. And he doesn't also visit. And this is a family that has 3 children, young children. So she was complaining to me that the kids get invited to birthday parties, but she can never celebrate the same birthday parties in her house and invite any child. And in Africa, here in Kenya, most, and they were living in a beautiful home that had a compound. So she was so stressed because as soon as she enters the house, the man is only comfortable with his nuclear family, his wife and his 3 children, and maybe the house help. That's it. Maybe the dogs. Oh yeah, they had dogs, but that's it. No visitors to the house. Now, I know a lot of you women are living those kinds of lives. I'm sure she's not alone. That in your home, you cannot entertain anyone, or you're the person who doesn't allow your husband to entertain his friend, or your children to allow visitors in the house. Just know that that is actually very selfish and self centered. I think that there's some people who shouldn't live with other people. One should actually evaluate yourself because once you have children, it's very unfair to isolate them from other kids. It's very, very unfair. Very, very super unfair. Actually, it's very, very unfair. Yeah. Because I see a lot of parents who keep their children behind closed gates for various reasons. They say they don't want them mixing with the neighbors. They're going to be fed poisonous food. I don't know. They don't want to play with the neighbors' children because they're going to be taught bad manners. Okay. Wrong. That is very wrong. You're teaching your children to have mistrust, and you're developing anxiety disorders in your child already because you're making them fear their environment. One of the ways I remember that we grew up when we were growing up with somebody like Susan, the one thing that we did was visit. Visit. Visit each other, go to each other's houses, go to the cookie jar in somebody's house. This where I grew up was a very interesting place. I'll tell you that one another day. But generally, there were people from different communities. We had Asians, they were celebrating Diwali. They would come with their Diwali dishes. We couldn't wait for Diwali to eat chevra. You know, chevra? It would be coming in all these stainless steel containers, and they would give them around to all the people. And then on the other hand, we had some British with some kids who had bunk beds. I mean, that was the first time I'd ever seen bunk beds, like really nice wooden bunk beds. I couldn't wait to go and have a pajama party in that house. Yeah, and I grew up in an era where our fathers were educated. Like my father, he had his PhD, and then he was one of the first PhDs in the country, and he came to take over from the colonial rule. So in that particular place, which was a research station, there were all people from different countries. So when he came in as the PhD, he took over from the directorship, and already they had formed a very beautiful work living environment with people from so many different countries. At that time, we had the East African community, so we had Ugandans, Tanzanians, Kenyans, and then we also had people from India, from Britain, so all the children would mix, and we would be out there picking macadamia nuts together, running and throwing our bag and going outside and picking macadamia nuts and hitting them with stones and cracking them and eating them. You know what? If I didn't grow up understanding how other people lived, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't. And that's how I raised my son, that we have to allow our children to experience different cultures when they're young. Because I remember going to one person's house, we were playing Monopoly, Scrabble, and the other house, there's nothing actually, over there. Actually, you'll find that one of the children is even stepping on a stool and she's cooking ugali. And you join her cooking ugali in that house. So you have people at different levels and doing different things, and you appreciate people's different cultures, and you grow up multicultural. Since I was a child, I grew up as a very multicultural person in this country called Kenya. So when you tell your child that the only thing that they're going to be exposed to is the four walls of your house, the dog outside, and the little compound and the gate, which is guarded by a watchman, it means that your children are prisoners. And it means that you have an anxiety disorder that you need to go and sort out before you give it to your child. Yeah. And your children are actually going to one day look back and believe that you actually abused them. You subjected them to abuse. Because that is a sort of anxiety disorder. It's a mental health condition that you have as a parent, and you need to sort it out. If you don't have it, your spouse has it. I'm not saying that your child should interact with everybody in the neighborhood, but I'm saying at least a select few parents, and you should get to know the parents of the children around, also try and integrate. Help your children to be able to integrate. And this is the reason why so many children today are here behind their phone. They don't know even how to talk to each other. This is like the loneliest generation. Yeah. So this is how people now, they're in toxic relationships with themselves, with their phones, and with strangers. Would you rather your child gets to know a real person or a fake person online? Yeah. Fear is saying something here. Unfortunately, here in the UK, this is a complex situation with children. That is true. But you see, fear, I'm not saying the direct neighbor necessarily, but you can be friends with another family somewhere that has kids. One way or the other, the children have to find a way to interact and be part of the society. Otherwise, it's a very, very difficult environment that you're going to be releasing them into, where they have no social skills and they grow up to become these people, these toxic narcissists who believe that everything is about them. And it starts
Mm.
from when you bring up that they're given all the attention, you overparent, you refuse to discipline, and in the end, what happens? These children grow up feeling like they're kings of the world and everybody should serve them. And that's it.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the 12-year-old telling her mom really he should leave. But don't forget, earlier on they wanted the dad to come and live with them. And like I mentioned, that that's quite dangerous. If the father was perhaps a more violent person, a more unstable person, or inclined actually to harm. Um, I remember coming across this true story in England, where the mother had had enough of that type of toxic relationship with her husband, and so she purposed to leave the home. So one day when the dad was away, she knew he had. I think he had he had actually beaten her, and then he went to the pub to continue to drink. So she decided enough is enough, and she's getting out of the house. So she had 4 children, so she packed them all up and wanted to leave. The oldest son refused to leave. He refused to leave. But she knew that if her husband comes and finds her at home, they're all gone. So she took off with the 3 children and herself. They took off. You won't believe it. The man came home, found his son there, and he set the locked them in the house and set the house on fire when the two of them in the house. So it was a murder suicide. So he unalived his own child and himself. And the only people
Yeah.
who survived in the family was the wife and the 3 children she had taken off with. But you see, what happened is there was a
Wow.
trauma bond between the firstborn son and his father. So he was
Mhm.
so terrified he could not leave. He was so used to, so conditioned to obeying his dad. He mistook it for affection, the way the father was treating him. Serious Stockholm syndrome, you know, and
Mhm.
he was not able to act in the right way to save his life. He was old enough to refuse, but the mother saw if she delayed anymore that they would all she
Yeah.
knew for sure she should not be in the house, so she took up with the
Mhm.
younger one, and he was left there hoping that he would not harm the older child, but he actually did. They were, they came and found the house on fire. It burnt down the house, and the two of them were inside the house.
Yeah. A
So,
lot of a lot of firstborn children
hmm,
actually are in trauma bonds with their parents
yeah, yeah,
because literally they're raised like military style. You're taught to obey. You're conditioned, is that the right word? Conditioned to obey. Conditioned not to have your own opinions. Conditioned to take responsibility for your siblings' behavior. Conditioned to take blame if anything goes wrong. Conditioned to literally raise your parents where they were not raised enough adequately. You step in for, you step in for the weaknesses of your parents. Firstborn children really go through a lot. And it's really, they should be protected. I think we should have a show one day on firstborn kids. So Susan, as we
yeah,
wrap up, because this is going
yeah.
to be a bit of a shorter show, um, what how can people safely leave these traumatic relationships, these trauma bonds. And before I continue, let me read what Fia is saying. Fia said that children need constant supervision. And she says parents are easily stressed. That's true. I suggest after school clubs. Yes, definitely. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just to react to what Eunice said in the last bit clip that you showed us, she said she described her husband as having no feeling at all, and that's very true. Complete lack of empathy, and that is why he could, beat her up and behave like nothing has happened. He would switch from one mood to the other, like nothing has happened, apart from the suspected bipolarism that we are suspecting. Just that complete inability to connect emotionally. The other thing is, she said, discard, you know, the narcissist person, and, will discard you when they've had enough of you and move on to the next victim, which at the close of the clip, because we not seen the end, she actually told him, after the conversation with the daughter, about a week later, she told him, look, I can no longer do this. I can no longer do this for you. I can no longer do this for you. I can no longer. Then he asked, so you want me to leave? She said, if that's the way you view my statement, yeah, it's okay. So he quietly just packed his few things and went, and he went. But what she discovered is actually he had been slowly packing his stuff up and was ready to leave the house. So actually, he was moving on to the next victim. I think he
Yeah, that's
possibly
true.
had
And what else did
somebody
he
lined up.
say? Yeah, she was surprised to find that he already had stuff in the car.
He
He
had,
was already,
yeah, I
yeah.
think he had lined up somebody else already. As you know, these type of characters, there's an overlap. There's no, a
Yeah,
disconnect from here to here, because they're so inherently dishonest.
yeah.
They're
But
pathological liars. So there was an overlap. So he was already packing to leave. And so, and
yeah, and
he'd
also
also had,
he told her,
Mhm.
let me never ever see you again.
Oh, this wasn't this time. That was the first time she left.
Oh, that's the
The
first
first
time
time
she
was,
left.
yeah, this
One of
other
the
time he
things,
was
though,
very
one of the
calm.
things I do, we have to also say that relationships, when there's problems on both sides. The one thing I feel that this lady did not do right was that she didn't listen to the man. She didn't listen to him. He kept telling her he did not like her, even with his own words. She was not beautiful. She was ugly. Who would love somebody like her? He's doing her a favor by coming back. Even when he came back, he was doing her a favor. And he told her, let me never see you again. And when she confronted him when he was with another woman, he would say, mind your own business, that kind of thing. And then he'd beat her up. He really did not like her. He didn't find her attractive. He wasn't attracted to her. He didn't care whether she left. But the one thing she did say about him was that he was a very good father. Super good father. And this is a funny thing. Why do these people compensate? But anyway, let's not go into that because we're winding up. Go ahead, Susan. We're now at the point where we're trying to figure out, how do we leave a toxic relationship? If you're in one already, how do you leave it? Or if you know someone who's in one, how do you encourage them to leave safely?
Yeah. First of all, it has to be that person's decision. Like you can see, it's not easy to leave. And in earlier shows, up to 7 times, women will leave up to 7 times before they eventually leave an abusive partner. Likewise for men, I think for men it's even more difficult because it shows some weakness, and also they don't really have many shelters to go to, or places of safety, because some women can be very violent, and it's not just physical violence; it could be emotional, economic, psychological violence. So yeah, so it's not easy to leave because of the trauma bond. And suggested one thing is you educate yourself on the trauma bond, and so that you understand actually what is happening to you and what's happening in your relationship. Second, you cut off completely from the abuser. That's one of the things, because you have to cut that link between them. It is not easy because you have been used to that treatment. You have to have a change mindset. And the other one is you need to engage in new activities, make healthy relationships is the fourth, and just really take some moment away from, even getting into another relationship. So don't go straight into another relationship. You actually do also need to go for support, get support, because this is mental state that you have been put into. Somebody has literally taken control of your mind by the way they have treated you, and you have been Stockholmed. You are a victim of the Stockholm syndrome, so it's very, very difficult for you to disconnect from that. Related to the trauma bond is something they call the soul tie. And the good soul ties and bad ones. So the negative one, a toxic soul tie, is an unhealthy emotionally draining connection with another person that can leave you feeling depleted, anxious, or overly attached, often stemming from a past relationship where there was significant drama, abuse, or codependency. It is a strong emotional bond that is harmful to your well-being. So that is connected to that. And the signs are, like she said, intense jealousy and possessiveness. The other one is codependency. Also, difficulty letting go. You saw she had to keep going back. It was easy to convince her to go back. She actually stayed away for 9 months the first time, 22 months the second time. So she actually tried to stay away, but would go back. And you could hear in her discussion, she was saying the children, the children, the children. Sometimes that's an excuse because of that connection. But, the desire is for her to go back. So they have difficulty letting go and they struggle to move on. So she was not able to move on emotionally, at least when it comes to a relationship with she was able to move on in terms of her work, but not emotionally. Suffering from separation anxiety. I don't know, she went to his house and found another lady staying in that house, and she went back to live with him. I found that very challenging because I think many women would not dare step into a house where another woman has been brought in. There's no guarantee that you'll not bring that woman in when you're there, So anyway, so separation anxiety, that's what I detected also, then identity issues, feeling like you lost a part of yourself and changing yourself to suit that other person. Those friends that you see who change so much. Once they get into a relationship with somebody, you can barely recognize who they are because of the type of soul tie or trauma bond they have got into, the toxic soul tie that they have got into with their spouse. So you can barely recognize them. And then negative emotions after interacting with them. And then, like obsessive thoughts that you may have. How to get out of the toxic soul ties is to set healthy boundaries. That means you need to talk about it, you set the limits and communicate, because these soul ties, again, are not just between husband and wife, it's any relationship, self-reflection and healing. You have to understand why you have that soul tie to that person. What is it that has connected you so deeply, spiritually and emotionally to that person? Seek help, get a therapist, talk to the therapist. Therapists, by the way, are very useful. They can really help people to rationalize things and get things in the right perspective. They're really good. Then self-forgiveness and also forgiving the other one, because once you self-forgive, it's a way of now moving. It's a way of closure. Self-forgiveness, and you also forgive that other person. Doesn't mean, by the way, that you have to have anything to do with that person who has traumatized you in this way. Forgiveness does not mean that you have to continue a relationship with that person. It just means that you have taken that step not to allow whatever it was, that soul tie, that impact, that post-traumatic stress disorder, the stress that you experience to guide you or to determine or to influence the way you behave and respond. The last one is focus on positive relationship. So getting out safely, acknowledge the abuse, make the decision to leave, seek support before and after. because even after you leave, you need support. Definitely, if the person has a tendency to be violent and is threatened to unalive you, you need to be very, very secretive and decisive about your moving, because this type of person is likely to follow you until they're ready to discard you. They will follow you to the ends of the earth. And even if they're jailed for a time and come out, they'll come back to stalk you. So until this person moves on mentally to go and traumatize somebody else, they'll continue to be a thorn in your side. Then create a safety plan. Of course, that's with advice and skill, depending on the nature of the person you're trying to disengage with and how many children you have and stuff, because if you're going to have to physically move. I know some people who've physically moved into other countries because of this type of dangerous situation. And their families have kept that place secret. They've just completely relocated elsewhere and they've gone, other things go completely no contact. And because of the soul tie, it's very, very difficult for that person to disengage completely, to disconnect, to move on from that person. So the tendency to try to call them, to miss them, even despite the fact that they've abused you, they've threatened your life and done all these terrible things to you, to try to get into contact with them is there. So this has to be a very, very, very decisive action. You get, of course, look for support system. The fewer the people know, the better. Don't make it public, but you need at least somebody you can speak honestly to, maybe the therapist or somebody else, a professional, to help you to go through this phase, so that you're able to completely start disengage and start a healthier relationship, and hopefully you will learn a lot about yourself that will help you avoid getting into these risky relationships.
Thank you very much, Susan. Those are great tips about, how, and then remember, be kind to yourself, guys. Yeah. Remind yourself, avoid blaming yourself. Yeah. Avoid it. Know that you did your best, and you didn't. You know that nobody gets into relationships or marriages wanting to divorce. So just know that, sometimes things don't work as you wanted or that you planned. And sometimes you don't have control. You don't have control for how other people behave around you. Yeah. Including your spouse or including your boyfriend or whoever it is. Yeah. And if it's a workplace, the same thing. You have control only for how you behave. Yeah. And then the final most important thing Susan mentioned, like about everything, except that one of the things that makes it very difficult, apart from the emotional bond, is the financial dependence that you have on the relationship. If you can find a way to, try to bridge the financial gaps. Like one of the things that made it difficult for this lady to stay away from this man is that she sent her children to her home, to her rural home. And when she went to visit them, they had lost so much weight that it just brought her to tears. And she decided earlier, when she was not really ready to take them back, she decided to get them back. And that kind of like made it difficult for her now. She now got them back and then went and begged this guy to allow her back. It's one of the few times, So she's like, look at your children. Yeah, look at their state. So as you're a wife, even if you're a wife or if you're a husband, put some money away aside, your own, or have some sort of assets, have some sort of finances somehow that only you have control over. Really, it's important. It's important because I remember when I got married, it was quite interesting that when I went to the bank, it was so interesting. I got married a bit late. The bank manager was a woman. And I told her, okay, now I'm married and whatever. We were friends. And she told me, okay, don't have a joint account. I was like, what are you talking about? Bank manager in Kenya. She said, don't have a bank account. Don't have a joint bank account. Don't join your bank account with his. I was like, why? This is a woman who doesn't know me well. She only knows me as a customer, right? But this is based on her experience with married couples. And I completely trusted her. I said, okay, I'm not going to do that, even if this is the love of my life. I'm just new, I'm in the honeymoon stage, and I want to join all our finances together. She actually put some sense in my head, and she said, no, a woman has to have her own money. Because you see, we met when I was already working. Yeah, not that I was this millionaire, but no, she knew I was working. I had a valid business. I was doing okay. And she was like, no, don't join the money together. And I was like, this is weird because you see, like my parents, they would join everything of theirs together. So actually, I was going to plan to do exactly that. So she stopped me. I think it's important for women to know that finances, it's kind of romantic and exciting to have, like, a joint bank account. But when it comes time to leave or to run away, how are you going to, you'll need his signature to release any money, any large sums of money. So I would say if you're going to have a joint bank account, maybe it's just for running the household affairs, and maybe have your separate bank account somewhere, where at least you have your own little savings, and maybe even have a little asset somewhere, a little house maybe that's bringing you some income, and that's in your name. And you can probably even arrange that if you have a loving husband. If you think at the very beginning when your honeymoon stage, you can ask for some assets to be in your independent names, because I tell you, in the end, the finances part is where I see a lot of women getting stuck, and then having to stick it out until it's just not feasible anymore, until they're not even alive anymore. Yeah. So guys, thank you so much for your time. It's been a lovely show. I really enjoyed it. And I just want to make sure that I haven't missed anybody's comments in here. Thank you, Fia. Thank you, Louis. Always lovely to hear from you guys. And all of you guys who are watching us out there, there'll also be a recorded show. Please remember to thumbs up our videos. Thank you for thumbs upping our videos. Don't forget to watch and thumbs up. Very, very important to thumbs up. And we'll see you next time, which will be on Sunday with our mental health show. So on that note, have a lovely weekend, and goodbye from Susan and I. Toodles. Bye bye. Yeah.